Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I'm Gayatri, and as we arrive together in this moment for our Season 2, Episode 32, Moments Make Momentum, I want us to begin with a deep breath, a breath that brings us fully here to this present second, this present moment, where we will spend time intentionally exploring the space between stillness and the next step of action or choice. And that space may feel quiet, almost invisible, but it is never empty, even if it is just outside of your awareness. It is where our presence of mind decides how movement begins. Every form of motion has this pause built in. Even our breathing lingers for a heartbeat between inhale and exhale. That small pause has a purpose. It is the gathering place of energy before direction is chosen. And when we meet that moment with discernment, we choose not just to move, but to move meaningfully, purposefully, intentionally. Physics tells us that momentum is the combination of the weight of something moving, the direction it's traveling, and the speed with which it is moving. But momentum is energy, and it doesn't just appear out of anywhere or nowhere. It is born from a different type of energy, because energy is never created or destroyed. It's just transformed, changes from one form to another. And momentum is born from our kinetic energy, the energy of movement itself. Within our season 2, back in episode 7, we focused on harnessing emotional energy. We spoke about how our emotions carry both potential and kinetic energy, and how our awareness can transform what we feel into movement that shape our actions. And of course, if you have not listened to that episode yet, I would highly encourage it. And also, it's a great refresher. As with all of my episodes, I make sure to include as many insights as I can into strengthening of our mind. Coming back to our current episode, kinetic energy is what happens when the energy we've been holding, which is our potential energy, which is our insights, our emotions, our intentions, begin to move through us. It is the shift from a stored potential to lived expression. So let's break down this dynamic in this way. The pause before movement is where our potential is coming together and gathering strength, and the momentum is what happens when that potential turns kinetic, which is when the intention finds the direction and begins to move to create that action or choice. When we think of momentum in our day-to-day lives as humans, it is what happens when our thoughts and emotions and conscious awareness align long enough for our actions to flow from our presence of mind. So, as we step into today's episode, I invite all of us to notice that space between stillness and movement as the birthplace of our own kinetic energy. Because in that moment, before choice of action even begins, the energy of who we are is already deciding where it will go next. Momentum in our human experience is not about constant movement or acceleration. It is about continuity. It is about what happens when our awareness carries through from one moment to the next, linking each small act of presence into a pattern or a direction. In this way, momentum becomes less about the pace of it all and more about the connection itself, how each moment stays linked to the one before it. When we think about the days when we've felt clear and we are not operating with urgency and hurry, we will note We moved steadily, maybe even slowly, but every step felt aligned. That is momentum. It's energy that has both weight and direction. It is presence traveling forward. The misunderstanding comes when we equate momentum with pressure, as if the only proof of progress is how quickly we can move. When we look at it clearly, we will see speed without alignment does not create progress. It creates friction. True momentum is born not from doing more, but from sustaining the connection with what matters while we do it. It is the energy that keeps us moving in the direction that is best for us, even when circumstances shift. We can think about it in this way. Momentum is what happens when the energy of one conscious moment continues on into the next moment, when our awareness does not reset back to zero every time we face change. Rather, we carry forward the clarity we have already built. When our thoughts, emotions, and conscious awareness align long enough for our actions to flow from presence of mind, momentum stops being autopilot or mechanical. It becomes just part of how we live our lives. Cognition gives us that direction with discernment, the clear sense of what we are doing and why. Emotion gives us the depth, the energy, and compassion that makes that movement matter. And consciousness gives us perspective, the ability to see ourselves within the movement instead of being consumed by it. When these three parts of our mind move together, our choices no longer feel forced. And on the other hand, when even one of these parts drifts out of sync, the flow changes completely. Thought without emotion can lose compassion and grace for ourselves and others as we navigate life. Emotion without discernment is awareness that can literally burn us out. This is why presence of mind matters so much. Presence is the bridge that is holding all these parts together long enough for the energy of one moment to inform the next. And that's what makes momentum within a human state sustainable. It is a conversation between what we think and what we feel and what we know in the quiet of our consciousness. And when that conversation continues, even through pauses and setbacks, momentum does not disappear. We just will continue with aligned intention. So, what does this tell us? Maybe we don't have to chase momentum after all. Maybe it is already present in the moments we stay aware, in the choices we make from steadiness rather than urgency, in the quiet persistence of continuing. Momentum for us is not about moving faster. It is about staying connected to what is moving us. And what is moving us is determined by every single moment of the now we are in. And if momentum is created by what moves us in each present moment, then the way we meet those moments become the structure that sustains it. Every day offers us countless micro moments, brief passing intersections with that space where awareness meets choice. And they're subtle. A pause before replying, a breath before deciding, a glance that chooses understanding over assumption. Each one may seem small, but together they become a rhythm that carries who we are, the direction we want to move in forward. Halt, rise, and shift, that inner sequence from my sire model we've practiced across the season, gives us a living framework to navigate these micro moments. They're not steps to follow, they're movements of awareness that return presence to motion. Halt is the first touch of our awareness. It's the moment we notice the hesitation, the avoidance, the scarcity mindset, or just our fatigue. The signs that our momentum is faltering. And in that noticing, energy stops scattering and starts to gather back. Rise follows as our recentering. Recognition, intention, our physical senses, evaluation. These are the quiet steps that bring our nervous system back into the present moment. They restore continuity, the link between what just happened and what now needs our attention. And shift transforms that awareness into direction. Stop, highlight, integrate, flow, and trust. A rhythm that turns insight into movement, into motion without urgency. Each repetition strengthens that connection between our cognition, our emotion, and our consciousness until movement feels less like reaction and more like alignment. Across the day, these micro moments starts accumulating. Each halt, each return to rise, each gentle shift forward adds a fraction of that weight, a fraction of direction, the mass and velocity of lived awareness. What physics describes as momentum becomes, in human terms, a continuous conversation between the pause and movement, awareness and choice. The pattern is simple. Awareness gathers, intention steadies, and movement aligns. Over time, these small recalibration becomes our architecture of consistency. Not a single surge, but the steady accumulation of presence of mind meeting our present moment again and again. With what I've shared so far, we can see the tremendous opportunity we have to steady our mind and our nervous system with simply reframing what momentum means for us. Momentum is not something to be built through effort or willpower. It is something that forms naturally when our awareness remains in motion. It does not live outside of us, waiting for us to chase it or maintain it. It lives within continuity between our moments, each one holding a trace of the one before it. Momentum gathers quietly in repetition. In the steady way, thought, emotion, and consciousness continue to speak with one another. And this understanding allows momentum to soften. It stops being a performance of productivity and becomes the evidence of our presence of mind. When awareness and intention stay linked, movement becomes an extension of being rather than a reaction of pressure. Momentum is in its most human form, is simply the willingness to stay actively engaged with the moment we are in again and again until presence itself becomes the movement. And when that kind of movement begins to take shape in real life, it does not look grandiose or sometimes even visible. It often appears in the smallest exchanges, the quiet decisions, the lived expressions that remind us how momentum feels when it moves through our everyday, steady and intentional. And moving steadily and intentionally through our everyday moments happens when our presence of mind is in tune with our awareness as we are moving. It is the moment of noticing that our thoughts have already run ahead, or that emotion is carrying the conversation, or that Our body is tightening with stress before words were even spoken. That recognition, that small act of seeing, is where presence begins. In a typical day, it might sound like the few seconds before answering a question that stirs frustration. It could be the breath that is taken instead of just reacting. It could be the awareness that fatigue has set in and the decision just to step outside of the scenario for air instead of pushing through one more. It might be remembering in the middle of a conversation that listening matters more than preparing to answer or even just replying. None of those moments change the world, but each of them determines the direction of what moment we are in, and it will determine our world. Presence of mind is not the absence of thought or emotion. It is their integration in real time. It is when the thinking mind slows down enough to hear what the emotion is trying to signal, and the emotional mind trusts the thought to guide the next step. That's how everyday lives to begin to hold coherence comes together. One moment of noticing becoming another, and slowly the pattern shifts, less reactivity and more response. This is the ground where true momentum lives. When our movements come from presence of mind, life starts to sound and feel different. It's not quieter exactly, but it's a lot more clearer. It is also true that presence of mind is not something that arrives once and just stays. It has to be reclaimed over and over in the middle of what is ordinary. It happens in the exact second we realize we are somewhere else, replaying the last conversation or racing ahead to the next demand of our time, and return back to ourself. And that return is the work. It is small, but it is real, and it is what maintains our momentum as a human. It might happen standing while we're at the sink when our body is washing a cup, but in the mind, we are already in some other meeting that we have to deal with tomorrow. That moment of noticing, that simple act of coming back to the water, the sound, the breath, that is presence. Or let's say we are in a conversation when we feel that irritation, annoyance beginning to rise, and then something inside quietly says, stay with it. Don't leave the moment yet. That is presence. Presence of mind does not change the content of the day. It changes the quality of attention we bring to it. It doesn't ask for something dramatic. It only asks that our thoughts, our feelings, and our awareness line up long enough for the next action we choose to be true instead of automatic. Over time, those tiny returns to awareness starts forming that pattern, that continuity, and continuity becomes the quiet current that keeps moving everything forward in your best interests. What builds momentum is not necessarily what we plan or promise. It is the invisible work of returning from a reaction to reflection, from hurry to honesty, from autopilot and habit back to intention. And each return strengthens the thread that is keeping the moments of a day connected to one another. Now let us move to the practice of presence of mind, because presence of mind, as we know, is simple in concept, but it is complex in practice because it moves through our daily lives. And that can bring in multitudes of challenges or just resistance to overcome. So we remain present. And when the intention is clear, awareness keeps meeting resistance. The quiet forces that pull the mind out of sync or scatter it across too many directions. These resistance are not flaws. They are ways our brain and body try to protect us, often by doing what once worked or what we learned from somewhere. Naming them helps us recognize what presence is being challenged with and where the return begins. The first resistance is the lack of integration within our mind itself. The mind, as we know, has got three parts to it: cognition, emotion, and the layers of consciousness: conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. And they don't always travel together. It takes our intention to ask them to travel together. Cognition races ahead with logic and analysis. Emotion carries the felt sense of the moment, heavier, slower. Meanwhile, the deeper layer of consciousness store older patterns that can surface randomly with our permission. When these parts move at different speeds, the nervous system begins to fragment. Thought speaks one language, emotion another, and behavior follows whichever is loudest. And this is why presence of mind matters. It is what gathers these parts together back into a conversation. Awareness does not silence them, it synchronizes them. Integration is not perfection, it is coherence, where all the pieces come together. And every return to coherence is a return to presence. The second resistance is the sense of urgency. Urgency floods our body fast. The stress response tightens muscles, quickens breath, and narrows our focus. In the brain, our blood flow shifts from our prefrontal cortex to the area that supports perspective, to the survival networks that demand immediate attention. We lose our breadth of perspective, and suddenly we have tunnel vision, like we have blinders on. Presence re-enters through awareness of something tangible, something physical of our body, our physical senses, feeling the pace of our breath, the set of our shoulders, the ground beneath our feet. When we shift our focus to something tangible, the signals tell the nervous system there is time, because you've taken your attention away from that space of urgency. And when urgency slows, clarity returns, and action becomes deliberate instead of reactive or defensive. The third resistance is uncertainty. Our brain is built to predict. It wants closure. It wants to just know, even if the closure is right, wrong, or not even exactly applicable. When information is missing, our mind fills the gap with stories, assumptions, worst-case rehearsals, imagined outcomes. This effort feels like control, but it leaves the body feeling tensed. Naming what is known and admitting what is not gives prediction system of our mind a rest. Presence of mind does not remove uncertainty. It makes space for it without panic. It turns the I don't know from a threat into truth, and truth steadies the system. And with truth, you can now do something about it. The fourth resistance is social heat, or external validation as a priority. Every nervous system carries the memory of what it means to belong. When a room becomes tense or approval feels at risk, the body can react before thought even can mediate. Our heart rate could rise, our language could soften, we may hold back our own authenticity. This is the social threat response, which is the exact same response for physical danger that our body gives us. Presence of mind recognizes that pull and grounds us in our self-inspiration, our integrity rather than performance. And that is the moment to take a breath, a pause, a silent check. Am I responding from truth or from fear of exclusion? That question cools the system enough for honesty to stay connected. The fifth resistance is the screen pull. The technologies at our fingertips. Attention is currency, and every alert we get is competing for it. Each notification delivers a micro dose of dopamine, our brain's way of rewarding us. The cost is fragmentation. The mind begins to live half a step outside of the moment we are in. Presence of mind here is not about rejecting technology. It is about reclaiming the power to choose when, where, how much. Choosing one focus at a time reteaches the brain the reward of depth. What steadies our attention steadies our nervous system. The sixth resistance is control reflex. Control often enters when trust leaves, and there's distance between what is unfolding in front of us and our confidence in it. And the mind reaches for certainty by tightening its grip. It tries to manage what cannot be managed, the pace of a conversation, the reaction of others, even the timing of life itself. Control is the nervous system's way of saying, I do not feel safe enough to trust right now. When trust in self fades, control starts to move inward. Thoughts spiral, checking and rechecking decisions, replaying what was said, searching for that one perfect move that will make everything feel stable again. When trust in others weakens, control starts reaching outward. We start to edit what we share. We try to anticipate every outcome or fill the silence before someone else can. And when trust in life softens, control tries to outplan the unknown. We mistake vigilance for preparation, but all it really is preparing us for is exhaustion, fatigue. Presence of mind restores trust through contact with what is real in the moment. It notices the ground that is steady for the person who is still listening, and that is our own selves. Each small confirmation tells the body some things are still reliable, and that message starts quieting the alarm. When we are integrated and intentional, presence will always meet these resistance. They're just part of being human. Every time awareness recognizes them and stays long enough to choose differently, the mind's networks is rewiring, is shifting patterns, is changing and learning a new way of being. Integration is strengthening, and what once pulled presence away becomes the very place it learns to hold steady. Our nervous system is built to protect, and it is also built to learn. Each moment of awareness in the middle of resistance is evidence of that learning, the point where safety and trust begins to coexist, and presence becomes our natural state again. And now, as we begin to bring this conversation to a close, let us pause with what we have covered in this time together. Momentum is not a chase. It is not a climb. It is the quiet continuity that forms when awareness keeps showing up for the moment that is here now. It is the return of presence of mind again and again until trust becomes movement and movement feels like steadiness. And Here are a few reflections for all of us to just sit with. Let's ask ourselves, what helps my mind return when distractions or resistance or challenges pulls it away? How does presence show up in the smallest of ways in a day? And what begins to change when the moment of awareness starts linking themselves together without force, just through repetition? Each return to our presence of mind is a moment that makes momentum. It is how our thought, our emotion, and our consciousness keeps finding each other, shaping the pattern, the rhythm that steadies our life itself. And in our next conversation, our season 2 finale, episode 33, Strengthen Your Life, we will bring it all together. Everything we've touched on throughout this season, how an integrated, trusting mind becomes the foundation of a strengthened life. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Gayatri, and I'm so grateful for the time we've shared here. Until next time, keep noticing your moments, keep returning to your presence of mind, and keep letting those moments make momentum that carries you forward and exactly to where you want to be.